The goal for each and every NFL team every year is simple: win. Win 17 regular season games, win 3 postseason games after having a first round bye, of course, have a parade and repeat. But as we know, like with a lot of things, not just in football, but in life too, that's a lot easier said than done. And while I don't think any team that is currently undefeated will go 17-0, in today's video we are going to break down a couple of undefeated teams and discuss how far they can go this year. We'll break down what's went right for them so far, what has not gone right for them, and any potential dangers they may have to prevent them from getting to the final goal, which of course is to win the Super Bowl. And full transparency, not every undefeated team is in today's video. There were 10 undefeated teams after week 2, and we've discussed a lot of the teams on the channel through the first few weeks of the year. You guys know how I feel about the Packers, the Bills, and the Eagles too, and for all 3 teams, not surprisingly, I think they can win the Super Bowl. Instead, I want to feature a couple of other teams that are undefeated at the time of this video release. And with that preface out of the way, let's begin! And we are starting today's video with the Los Angeles Chargers. The Chargers are 2-0 through 2 games and have looked really good in the process. Justin Herbert has 5 passing touchdowns to 0 interceptions in 2 games, and what I think is the most promising thing for the Chargers through 2 games is how good the receiving trio has looked. Quentin Johnston has obviously had his ups and downs over the last few years, and unfortunately for Quentin Johnston, he's had drops at poor moments, whether it was the 2023 drop against the Packers in the final minutes or the drop against the Ravens last year in prime time. It's been a long couple of years for him, but he's looked really good so far, and so has Ladd McConkey and Keenan Allen. And I know there's been a lot of jokes on social media about Omarion Hampton and if you drafted him high in fantasy and how that's going and everything along those lines, but I do believe the Chargers' run game will get better as time goes on. If you know anything about a Jim Harbaugh team, it's that there's going to be an emphasis on running the football, and Omarion was a really good prospect coming out of North Carolina, and I do believe his time will come. And he's also not the only rookie running back to struggle coming out of the gate. But their defense has also been really good, and in 2 games, they've allowed a single passing touchdown and have intercepted 3 passes. I do believe Jesse Minter will be an NFL head coach someday, and even after Khalil Mack left the game against the Raiders, the defense never wavered. And while that injury was pretty ugly, it isn't season-ending, and that's obviously very good news for the Chargers. And why I think this team can go particularly far is this defense has playmakers at every level. Dion Henley is a budding star, and the secondary is of course led by Derwin James. So when you look at this defense, truly what is the weak point? The Chargers drafted nose tackle Jamari Caldwell in the 3rd round this year, and along with Tier Tart, their job is going to be to plug up holes in the run game so the Chargers can get to 3rd and long, which is exactly where Jesse Minter wants opposing offenses. In some ways, this defense reminds me of the Packers' defense of the AFC. Not a carbon copy, of course, but there are some similarities. And my biggest question for the Chargers at this point, who I do believe will make the playoffs, is which team is going to show up when the season is on the line? We know what happened last year in the wild card round, and it was a nightmare. And I know it's only been a couple of games, and this also applies to the Colts too for that matter, but I couldn't be more impressed with the way this team responded from all of the media pressure and narratives placed on them this summer. The Chargers' next 5 games are home against the Broncos, at the Giants, home against the Commanders, at the Dolphins, and home against the Colts, and while I don't expect them to win every game, obviously, I wouldn't be surprised to see this team at 6-1 through 7 games. Justin Herbert is playing at a high level through 2 games, and the defense has allowed 30 total points and the 7th fewest yards in the NFL, and outside of a few Patrick Mahomes runs in which he took off after the play broke down, opposing running backs have not been able to get anything going against this team. And like we said, you know a Jim Harbaugh team is going to want to run the football, and they're not going to give up pounding the rock just 2 games in. So for as good as the Chargers have looked at times through the first 2 weeks, I still think there's untapped potential. The sky is the limit for this team, and the only thing I would ask is which team will show up when it matters most. And today's video is sponsored by PrizePicks and my sign-up code GFB. Week 2 was fun for some teams, definitely not my team, but anyways, I do have my pick'ems for week 3, and with the season-long partner of the channel, PrizePicks. And for my week 3 pick'ems, I really like Josh Jacobs to score against Cleveland, and I know Cleveland did a good job of stopping Derrick Henry last week, but stopping 2 good backs in a row is tough, and based on how I think this game is going to be played, I think Green Bay will have the opportunity to get Josh Jacobs the football on the goal line, and I like him to score. Now, we do have Cincinnati against Minnesota this week, meaning Jamar Chase versus Justin Jefferson, and even after Joe Burrow went down last week, Jamar Chase still got his, so I do like Jamar Chase to score against Minnesota. Carson Wentz, whatever you may think of him, trust me, I'm sure it's justified, but I do think that he will be able to get Justin Jefferson the football, and I like Justin Jefferson more than 78.5 receiving yards. All of this is, of course, paired with the half-yard special of the week, which is for Patrick Mahomes to throw for more than 1 yard against the New York Giants. So use my code GFB when you download the PrizePicks app, link below, and when you make your first $5 deposit, you will receive $50 in lineups instantly. We're trying to get 100 signups by the end of the month of September, and we're almost there, so use my code GFB and make your first $5 deposit, and you will receive $50 in lineups instantly. And a big thank you to PrizePicks for sponsoring today's video. Next up is the San Francisco 49ers, and whenever we start a conversation with the 49ers in terms of how far they can go and what the rest of their season-long outlook may look like, it has to start with injury luck, and unfortunately the 49ers generally seem like they are one of the more injured teams out of all 32 teams in the NFL, and that they generally have worse injury luck than other teams. And I'm not getting into a conversation of, hey, I know more than their training staff and that they need to fire their training staff and that they're doing it wrong out there. That's the absolute last thing that I'm trying to say, or that George Kittle needs to listen to me and needs to do 3 sets of 20 reps on a lying hamstring curl machine to fix his grade 2 hamstring injury at 31 years old, and then he needs to go bike 6 miles on the stationary bike. I'm absolutely not getting into that conversation, but that does have to be noted. Now, if I criticize a coach's decision, like Matt Eberflus last year, to not call a timeout on Thanksgiving Day at Detroit, then that's a completely different situation. So, not getting into the medical part as much as it is something that has to be noted pertaining to the 49ers season-long outlook. And pertaining to the 49ers season-long outlook, as long as they are more healthy than not, this is going to be one of the best teams in the NFL for a couple of reasons. They have a very advantageous situation, and they're already 2-0. They play both NFC and AFC South divisions this year, which is a lot different than playing the NFC North or maybe the AFC West, and that would be a completely different set of circumstances, because then instead of having to go to maybe Houston or Jacksonville, they would have to go to the LA Chargers or the Kansas City Chiefs, and you get the point. So they have a very favorable schedule, all things considered, and their final 4 games after a week 14 bye, which I would already argue is very beneficial to having that late of a bye. Well, 3 of the final 4 games are home games, and the only road game is at another undefeated team, and it's at the Indianapolis Colts. But to be able to set your team up like that, and to be able to have an advantageous situation like that, is going to favor a team like the 49ers in the long run, who are already doing a lot of things right. And I love the addition of Robert Saleh, or the reunion of Robert Saleh coming back to be the defensive coordinator, and we've seen him already work his magic in the first couple of games of the year. I loved the trade for the 49ers to acquire Bryce Huff this offseason from the Eagles, who was unfortunately a free agent bust for the Eagles last year, and Bryce Huff is obviously more of a DPR than anything, which is a designated pass rusher, and we've seen that in his snap count so far for him predominantly playing in pass rush situations. And whenever you can have an edge rushing duo of both Bryce Huff and Nick Bosa, who is of course a former Defensive Player of the Year award winner, well, you are going to be set up for success more often than not. This, of course, is all without being mentioned about a Hall of Fame talent at middle linebacker in Fred Warner, who is all over the field, and not surprisingly, in the first 2 games of the year, Fred Warner has been all over the field. So whenever you look at the 49ers situation, in addition to all of the draft assets they spent in 2025 on fixing the run defense, which was a big problem for this team last year, given that they are rookies just a couple of games into the year, I wouldn't have expected too much of an impact right from the start from Micah Williams and Alfred Collins, and we haven't seen too much of an impact from those two, specifically Alfred Collins, in the first couple of games of the year. But that was one thing that we hammered home in the 49ers team preview, was that there may not be a lot of rookie impact initially, but when this team is in late December and early January, when teams want to pound the rock, the strategy or the philosophy of the 49ers defense is simple. Bob Saleh wants to get teams in early rundown situations, be able to stop the run, and then be able to have his guys get after the quarterback on 3rd and 8+, and that's exactly what the 49ers have done over the first 2 games, and not surprisingly, they're 2-0. I think it's pretty impressive the 49ers are 2-0 despite what was a very losable game in Seattle due in some part to the special teams play, and there is a reason that Jake Moody is no longer on the team despite the team investing a third-round selection in back in 2023, but there's a lot of positives to still take away from the 49ers' first couple of games. Mac Jones looks to be a viable backup quarterback if it comes hell or high water. You can legitimately win games with Mac Jones as your quarterback for the 49ers. That's also a player that Kyle Shanahan loved back in the 2021 pre-draft process. I've also been impressed with Ricky Pearsall, their 2024 first-round receiver, and think that he can go for over 1,000 yards in the 2025 season, especially based on what we've seen so far. I also think Brock Purdy is a really good quarterback who unfortunately receives probably more criticism than what he should receive, whether it's due to having a good supporting cast or the fact that Kyle Shanahan is his head coach. But based on the chemistry we've seen between Brock Purdy and Ricky Pearsall through the first game that they played, which was in Seattle because Brock unfortunately missed week 2, I think there is something there. There was a play in the fourth quarter when San Francisco was down 3 points. Ricky Pearsall was running an out route, and he created a lot of separation off of the stem in and then back out against Tariq Woolen. Brock Purdy throws a really good ball from far hash, and San Francisco moves the sticks. And if we are seeing that in game 1 of what was effectively a lost rookie season for Ricky Pearsall, unfortunately due to an off-the-field tragic situation, then I think everything is going to be fine, and as long as George Kittle comes back healthy, Brandon Ayuk is going to be fine once he comes back too, then I think we're talking about a team ceiling for the 49ers that could very easily reach the NFC Championship game, if not Super Bowl. But like we started with the 49ers segment, the biggest thing for this team is health. Next up is the Indianapolis Colts, who, much to the surprise of a lot of people, are off to a 2-0 start. Now, one thing that I think needs to be noted with the Colts is because they are a surprising team in the early parts of the 2025 season, does not mean the success is going to last. And for how good Indy has been, and for how good Daniel Jones has looked, the Saints last year through 2 weeks scored 29 more points than Indy did in the first 2 weeks of this year. Now, what I will say about Indy pertaining to their season-long outlook is I think they are a lot different compared to the 2024 Saints. I love the structure Indy has in place, and it's not a coincidence they've had back-to-back 400-yard games. And at the moment, Daniel Jones is receiving a lot of love, and rightfully so. Good for DJ, and a player who I could not have been more wrong about over the summer based on what I thought he would be in 2025, if he started over AR, of course. Jonathan Taylor has also been phenomenal and has over 300 yards from scrimmage in the first 2 games of the year too. And the defense has played better than I thought they would have through the first few weeks, and that's a credit to Lou Anarumo and coming up with timely turnovers. But when you sit back and ask how far the Colts can go in 2025, there are a few concerns I have with Indy that I don't have with other teams in this video, at least not to this magnitude. And it's not taking the low-hanging fruit or a cop-out answer of basically saying Daniel Jones could never lead this team into Buffalo or Baltimore with the season on the line and win. Nobody would think that's an unfair take, but I'm not discussing that pertaining to this discussion. I do worry about the secondary's health as they already have multiple players on IR, and granted they're not their best players in the secondary, so it's not like Indy is down their CB1 and best safety, but I do worry about depth in the secondary as well as the pass rush over the course of the season. Indy's pass rush has not been great through the first 2 games. It hasn't been bad, but it hasn't been great, and while I do like DeForest Buckner and Laiatu Latu, I ask a question that we go back to the 2025 Colts preview that we had over the summer, and the question is, do they have enough defensively? Full transparency, I believe they will beat the Titans in Week 3 to start out 3-0, but I really can't wait to see this team play the Rams in Week 4, because that's going to be a huge measuring stick for the Colts to see where they are. Unfortunately, they do not play Buffalo or Baltimore this year, but they will travel to LA to play both the Rams and Chargers, as well as travel to Arrowhead to play the Chiefs. And outside of those 3 games, which are undeniably difficult, they have a favorable schedule all things considered. They play in the AFC South, which, as we know, is not a great division, and based on how we've seen the Colts offense operate through 2 games, and the defense coming up with timely turnovers, combined with the struggles the rest of the AFC South has had, whether it be the offensive line struggling, and this is other teams, of course, or beating themselves, or simply not closing out games, Indy would be my current pick to win the AFC South. And we've seen Daniel Jones in a point guard type role this year where he is doing a great job of distributing the football and playing on time, and really outside of a throw or two, not putting the ball in harm's way. Not to say he's been a game manager, because he hasn't been, and he's had several good throws in the first 2 weeks of the year, most notably the big play to Alec Pierce in week 1 against Miami, and another big play to Alec Pierce in week 2, and the point is, I don't really worry about the offense 2 weeks into the season. However, I do worry about how this defense will hold up in the long run, and unfortunately for Indy, based on how Minnesota's season ended last year with the collapse with Sam Darnold, and obviously the career Daniel Jones has had up to this point, there's going to be a lot of non-believers in the Colts all year long, fair or not. And if they lose in the wild card round, they will be the first to say and to scream, "See, I told you so." But as of now, I think the Colts' ceiling is a divisional round exit. The Los Angeles Rams are up, and one thing that I do want to note with the Los Angeles Rams, very similar to how we discussed with the 49ers, is if they have an injury or two, especially offensively, then their season is drastically altered. And I don't mean this if Matt Stafford goes down, that they're done, because obviously if Stafford goes down, Josh Allen, Lamar, obviously all of those franchises' seasons would be altered, right? So what I mean by this is Puka Nacua and Davante Adams are obviously a very good duo, and Matt Stafford threw one hell of a ball to Davante Adams against the Titans in week 2, and Puka Nacua is at this point Puka Nacua. He is undoubtedly one of the best receivers in the NFL, and we'll see how this season goes, but he could solidify himself as a top 3, if not top 4 receiver in the NFL by season's end. However, football is obviously a very violent game, and it's a very physical game, and if one of those players go down, then we're talking about Jordan Whittington or Tutu Atwell or Kanata Mumpfield who have to step up, and obviously I wouldn't trust any of those players, even for as much as Rams fans love the story of Jordan Whittington and love who he is as a player, but I obviously don't think he's going to be able to play at the same level as Puka Nacua or Davante Adams when it comes hell or high water. Now, positively, what I will say for the Rams, at least pertaining to the rest of their season outlook, is they haven't been able to run the football as much or as efficient as they would have liked through the first couple of games, and obviously with a Sean McVay team and even a Kyle Shanahan team like we discussed with the 49ers, they are going to want to run the football, and I refuse to believe that what we've seen through the first 2 weeks of the year from Kyren Williams is what we're going to see for the remainder of the year. Now, Blake Corum has looked good in the limited time or the limited capacity that we've seen from him, so maybe we'll see more of a split between Kyren Williams and Blake Corum, but I refuse to believe that the Rams are going to be this inefficient running the football as they were in the first 2 weeks for the remaining 15 games of the 2025 season. Now on the channel, we talk about team building a lot, and after the 2022 season in which the Rams finished just 5-12, and it was in a year where their big 3 players in Matt Stafford, Cooper Kupp, and Aaron Donald at the time all got injured, and after their stars got injured, especially for as star-studded of a team as that was, not surprisingly, their season went down the drain. And after that year, I was really bleak on the Rams' future, because this was a team that didn't have a top 6 draft pick because it was involved in the Matt Stafford and Jared Goff trade, and obviously winning a Super Bowl was going to cure everything. So in reality, even if the Rams kind of stunk after that, it was still going to be okay because they got the end goal of the Stafford trade, which was to win a Super Bowl. But pertaining to the 2023 draft and the 2024 draft, I was hesitant on how much to buy into the Rams, but they've done a tremendous job over the past couple of years, and the reason we bring past drafts up pertaining to their 2025 season-long outlook is because they've been able to draft guys like Byron Young and Braden Fisk and Jared Verse and Steve Avila and Puka Nacua, of course, and everything that they've done over the past couple of years has set a base level of where we should expect the Rams to be for their success moving forward. And obviously Matt Stafford plays a tremendous level within this because he is playing at such a high level, and I don't think it's unreasonable to have him in a top 5 or 6 quarterback conversation, due in large part to the arm talent that he has, especially at this stage in his career. But based on what Les Snead was able to do in the draft over the past couple of years, and to be able to raise the floor of where this roster is, was nothing short of tremendous. And even if Matt Stafford goes down for a few games and they have to play Jimmy Garoppolo for a few games, I don't panic with this team the way I would with other teams. Now, if he's down for the season, that's an entirely different conversation, but with this team's ability to get after the quarterback the way that the Rams can, and the way that they can dominate games defensively up front, like we said, with whether it's Byron Young or Jared Verse or Fisk or anybody else, even Poona Ford, who I thought was a tremendous signing for them in free agency this year, I think the Rams have a much higher floor than other teams. And despite starting out 2-0, I would have said this before they started out 2-0, that I think their base really every year moving forward should be around the 8-9 win area because of how many good football players they have on their team. And sometimes whenever the draft rolls around, the Rams have done a tremendous job of this. It's as simple as drafting good football players. Former undrafted free agent linebacker Nate Landman also had a tremendous forced fumble against the Texans in week 1, and it was a beautiful play because he punched the pocket right where the opportunity struck. And whenever you talk about championship winning teams, there's always a player that steps up that you don't expect to make a big play. And last year in the Super Bowl, it was Cooper DeJean. Now, a lot of people knew who Cooper DeJean was prior to the Super Bowl, but he certainly wasn't on the level of Jalen Hurts or Saquon Barkley or A.J. Brown or Lane Johnson from an offensive line standpoint, or even Jalen Carter from a defensive standpoint. And for Nate Landman, a player to step up and make a play like that, who, by the way, has played well through 2 weeks, along with the team that's coached by Sean McVay and led by Matt Stafford and Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams, along with a run game that I expect to get going, as well as a pass rush that I expect to get going too, well, I'll be honest, the sky is the limit for the Los Angeles Rams, and if you told me right now that this team would win Super Bowl 60 in San Francisco, I wouldn't bat an eye. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, please like the video and subscribe, as we are trying to get to 215,000 subscribers by the end of the month, and I cannot thank you guys enough for the support. Thank you to PrizePicks for sponsoring today's video, and until next time, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.